let's talk about you, dude. So like, I started reading into like, I went into your website, been following you, and mostly going into your website and trying to understand really what you're doing. But I saw that you do teaching, you do work, you're talking about work ethic, you're working with mentoring, you're working with universities. So talk to me a little bit about your organization and about yourself. And then I want to know what got this started. Like,
sure.
Where did this whole thing, what was the birth of this whole thing?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to talk baseball, but then also, I think we're in the same field in terms of helping people. And
and that's what I want to talk about.
Yeah, and for me, that looks like multiple ways, right? Like we're both fathers, it seems, me and you. My kid's not old enough to play AU yet, but we're both in that world of where it's everybody else first and then us maybe third or fifth, right? But I got into what I'm going to talk about really today through years and years of trying to want to make it in sports. And if I could go back to that story, I mean, I will happily share it with you. But I really think a lot of it comes from me wanting to help an athlete, right? And teaching is no different, because what I'm doing right now in teaching is I'm a professor at a school outside of Philadelphia called Newman University. And I help run the sport management program. I also teach in the business school, so I teach some business classes as well. So that's my main thing.
I was a sports management major.
Yeah, and like that's the other thing is like these students come in and they're a sports management major and nobody knows what that really means on the outside until you're in it. I always joke with my students who are freshmen and say, like, we're not just going to come in here and talk about like what Stephen A. Smith said yesterday. Like, we're going to talk about things that introduce you to the industry, and we're going to get down and dirty and actually do the work behind what sports is, which is a business, right? Like, if we understand that it's a business, we can change things. So teaching kind of opened my door to what I'm going to end up talking about, which is my research. And when you start teaching, you need to have your doctorate. It's like one of those things, like you can have your master's for only so long and you have to get your doctorate. And when I was pursuing that, getting my doctorate, I needed to figure out what my research area was, what my intersection was going to be. And for me, I can tell my story from the beginning if you want me to. For me, that really went.
I would love to hear it. Something ignited you.
Yeah. Well, all right. So what ignited me is the complete opposite of what happened to you. It's like, I was not good at baseball. So I grew up loving the game. I still love the game. It's definitely my favorite sport. I think the parallels, the mirrors to life are just so like evident. And I really loved it. I mean, it helped that my father was one of those people who also loved the sport, but I grew to love it. Probably by the time I was 13, I realized I was not going to go pro in any level. Like I wasn't going to get there. So I started to like shift, what do I want to do? Like, I love sports. I love baseball. I wanted to do something. And this is pre-internet, like craziness, like no Twitter, none of that stuff. And I really wanted to be an agent because I would read in newspapers, this agent was helping this guy get this contract and all that kind of stuff. But I was naive. I had no idea what I was doing. So I actually like went from being 13 years old to probably 20 years old, trying to live that dream. I would talk to agents. I would talk to players. I was having friends that were making it or trying to get there and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until I went to college and had internship, because you have to get like a solidified internship, that I realized I couldn't do this. Like, there's so many immoral, unethical, integrity issues in that field. And it just made me feel like it wasn't me, like it didn't fit who I was. But I realized at that time, what I really enjoyed was the hustle. Like, I loved helping people. I loved chasing, helping to recruit or sign someone. I loved all that stuff, but I didn't like the behind the scenes stuff that was happening with giving players money, giving players cars, doing all this illegal stuff. And what I found to love was
dropping duffel bags off, right?
I didn't have the money to do it. I was seeing some of this stuff. I was seeing the handshakes and doing all that kind of stuff. But what I really loved was helping someone orchestrate or direct their career, right? And when you're little and you're in college, nobody talks about the athlete who doesn't make it. Like, nobody ever talks about that. They only talk about the one who does. And when they talk about the one who does, what you start to realize is the narrative becomes, look at this person. They're a millionaire. They're making all this money. Their life is set, all that kind of stuff. There's no research. I mean, there's very few, I should say. There's no research really on what happens to an athlete when their career is done. So over the course of me wanting to chase that dream, I kind of fell into some holes of like, I'm going to do marketing and branding because then I could still be behind the athlete. I never wanted to be up close. I never wanted to be like a Drew Rosenhaus. Like I never wanted to be the face. That's not my scene. So I always wanted to be behind. So I was like marketing and branding. That's how I can do it. I worked with athletes. I worked with personalities, media companies, conferences, athletic. Like I worked with the whole thing, and I did it for a while. And then I just kind of got burnt out and went into teaching. So it's kind of funny because I felt like I retired to go into teaching, but teaching is like my true love. And I think the intersection of what I'm telling you, why I wanted to be an agent and where I am now with teaching is how I started to marry the two. So it's the educator in me, right? To help someone to get their career on the path. It's the knowledge of what it is to play professional sports and then what happens when you're done and you have to go into that second career. That's the transition. So when we talk about the transition is whether you're a high school phenom or you're a college stud and you go to the pros, whether it's single A or, double A, wherever you start, wherever you thrive, that's a transition too. But that's the transition that you've worked on for your entire life. So in some ways you're prepared. In some ways you have to get assimilated or whatever the word is, acclimated to the process or the hierarchy or the structure that is in place. But the hardest transition is the one after playing, is life after sport. And in this case, we're talking about baseball players. And I saw that minor league baseball players especially are a category of athletes, I'll say sports, that are really oppressed. They don't have any union. They don't have any advocacy. They don't have anybody, really validating who they are and why they need certain things. But it's okay if they're in the new Bowman draft set and people are pulling the rookie cards and then selling them for $90,000. Like that's okay. But now if the guy doesn't make it past AA because he had a divorce with his wife or he blew out his arm or he has to go home because something's happening with his parents or whatever it may be, nobody's there to help. Right. And that's kind of the thing that I fell into is like, as an educator, you're there to help people. You're the bridge between college and the real world, as we call it, right? The job that you have to get. How is that any different than what I could do for baseball players, what I can do for professional athletes, the bridge between you played a sport, now you're going into retirement and you have to find life after sport. So I'll kind of hush up a little bit because that's my long-winded answer.
You're speaking my language and I understand everything you're saying. And I've said this story and people ever ask me about my career. I'm like, the White Sox don't know if I'm dead or alive, right? Like the minute I got on a plane and I left Tucson, Arizona, like it was like, all right, well, I was never released, but I technically retired. All right, here's your flight and see you later. Like there was never an execution like exit strategy, right? And one of the things that I thought about is, and I've talked to Raul about this, I've always had this dream of starting this thing called Think Beyond Baseball. And I think it needs to be tailored to baseball players. Now that sounds counterintuitive, right? Like, what do you mean think beyond baseball? Yeah, dude, like you can be the biggest baller, right? And the average career stats and metrics and data tell us you're probably going to play 3-4 years at most, right? So you get in, you're 24, 25. What are you going to do when you're 30? And no one's having that conversation. And the players aren't having that conversation because they don't get it yet, right? And I think this thought just hit me as I speak to you. I think sometimes they don't have this conversation because it's fearful, right? It's like, hold on a minute. Like I'm all in. I'm going to be a big leaguer. I'm going to do this. And it's almost like you don't want to, it's like talking about death, right? Like, yeah. So you go meet with your financial advisor and you want to do your estate planning. And guess what? Now you got to have to sit down and make tough decisions and nobody wants to talk about, right? No, right? But you have to talk about it. So I think for a player, maybe it's not that they don't want to talk about it. It's just that is such a fearful place to go into to speak about, right? That they subconsciously like don't want to go there. Like, and maybe if you, with educational programs, with the right teacher, with the right leaders, we can talk about it in a healthy way and be like, dude, you know what? Actually, the most exciting times of your life are going to happen when you're not playing no more. Right. Yeah. And here's why.
There's a lot of things. So like, if you pull the stats, like you were saying, right, like 90% of baseball players will at one point have their contract terminated. So it's 90%. That's 9 out of 10.
90% has what? Their contract terminated?
Their contract terminated. at one point in
the
their
way I
career,
write notes as I do this
yeah.
too. Okay?
But I mean, if you think about it like that, even the best players are going to have their contract terminated. So it's very rare that the Buster Posies are going to walk away, right? Like that. It's very rare. And that's why people are, I don't want to say stunned, but they're like left, like he had a year left. Like what's going on? And if you look at the other numbers, 1,500 players get recycled. And I'm using that word on purpose, recycled, because they leave an organization. Do they get picked up somewhere else? Maybe. Do they get latched on as the third catcher who doesn't get paid in spring training? Possibly, right? Yeah. Like, do they try to make it in indie league, or do they go work for their dad who runs a car dealership while pitching on the side? Yeah, probably. So it's 1,500 players who get recycled. And if you look at that, that's from an organization. If you times that by all the teams, so we have 30 franchises. I mean, that's an astronomical number. That's more than like some universities graduate in a year. So that's crazy. What happens to these players is really the question, right? And like the think beyond baseball thing is interesting. I think a lot of it is, to me, and I'm not trying to distill what you said, but a lot of it to me comes back to one thing, which is identity. I've talked to baseball players, and when I was doing my research and I was trying to start my own company, which is like a soft launch, I'm still like getting into the launch more. I had to kind of put myself out there during the pandemic, because there were a lot of players that were like, listen, I don't know if I'm cut. I don't know if I'm released, but we're on a standstill because of 2020 and, quarantining and all that kind of stuff, that I'm just going to have to do something. So through my network, I talked to some players that were in single A, double A, and you know how it is, like a double A player who's 26 years old. He's having that conversation. And they do say it's like two deaths, like you die right when you retire, and then you die when you really die. But for this player
I will tell you, when I went to go see, when I went to get help, right? Because I started having all this like panic attacks and like just like this whole identity, like it just everything hit me at once.
It is identity.
They use the word, sports psychologists will tell you it's like it is a death. It's like it's a death of an old you. But the key is, and when the key is that you can teach these. It needs to start when they're young, though, right? It was never you. That was baseball is what you do. It's not who you are. And that could be baseball, and that could be, for me, it could be insurance now or whatever.
Being a father, it could be
correct.
That's my hesitation. So I'm not saying anything about sports psychologists. It's a field that like I just chose not to do. I feel like I understand psychology to a point that I could talk about it, but the death, no problem. The death isn't you. The death isn't you dying. It's an emergent, right? Like you're emerging from this. And the thing that we never talk about is skills. Like it's baked into your identity as a skill. So like, I'm sure as a father, and let's put aside that you're also a coach, right? Mm-hmm. That there are skills that you have as a father that you got and learned from being on a team, baseball team, or playing a sport. Let's say it's baseball. Like we can just fill in the blank.
I think I learned everything on a field. Everything.
So that's the
business.
Thing.
To me, it's a baseball game. Like it's just
that's the thing that they don't teach athletes as a whole. They don't teach you that, like, dude, you've worked 18 to 22 years on this one thing, a sport you play. But there's so many skills that you've baked into that if you go on any job description in any field or industry, you'll be like, I have that. How do I have that? From the sport I played. I have that skill. How do I have that? From the sport I played. And if you just go through that transferable skills, the identity shift that you go through is actually different, because that identity shift is like, I can see myself there. That's the emergent. You can see yourself there. It's like, think about it's like dating, right? Like when you date people, you have a bad relationship, right? That relationship fizzles out. And you're like, listen, I like this about that girl, right? I didn't like this about that girl. Let me go find a girl that I like these things on. And you just kind of go like that. So we know that stuff because in dating, we're supposed to be nimble. We're supposed to be resilient. But in job searching, in a career, they don't talk about that, because the people who talk about this stuff are the people who have built careers, right? And stayed at a company for 30 years and just kind of evolved. But I mean, let's go back to the part of like the baseball player going through this transition. I'm talking to this player who's 26 years old. I think he was 26 years old. He was in Double A. He calls me one day. It was like, I think it was it was March of 2020. He goes, listen, Evan Longoria just spoke to us. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be good. And he goes, he just told us that if we have a plan B, can I curse on here? He goes, what? We're fucked. He's like, if you have a plan B, you're fucked. And I said, Okay. He goes, what do you think about that? I go, that works if you're Evan Longoria. That's what I said. Because it does. It works if you're Evan Longoria, right?
It works for him.
It works for him. And it also works for him at that point in his life. I mean, Evan Longoria has had a great career. I'm not knocking that, right? But Evan Longoria at 18, would he have said the same thing? No. Like, I idolized Kobe Bryant. I created a college course on him, right? I'm going to tell you that Kobe Bryant is a top 5 basketball player of all time, and you can dispute it or whatever you want. But the thing is that Kobe Bryant at the age of 20 started a rap career as a hobby. And why did he do that? Because he wasn't sure that his career would be 20 years. Kobe Bryant started writing books. He started writing plays, he started writing TV shows and podcasts and all these stories because he wasn't sure that he was going to play for 20 years. He played for 20 years. So to your point, there's something to be said about having a plan B, helping your identity, holistically developing who you are that can actually help you conquer plan A. That's the thing we don't talk about.
I think all extremes are bad.
They are black and white. You know,
that's like saying,
there's a gray area.
That's like saying that if you don't have money in a savings account, like go all in the investment. Oh, I don't know. Well, that's pretty fucking stupid, right? I mean, like, I think you should have risk tolerance, and you should know what your risk tolerance is, right? Like, you look at your balance sheet, you look at your P&L, say, okay, well, I think I can invest in this, but it would be dumb if I put all my chips in one, and right. So I think the intention behind that statement is solid and comes from a good place. But I think us with a little bit more maybe emotional intelligence and a little bit more maturity in the, outside of the game, hold on a minute, I get what you're saying, right? Like, I'm all in on insurance, right? This is what I do. I invest in human capital. I invest in our facilities. I invest in our products, technology, but there's also some room for error. There has to be. Like, it's how we balance this whole thing. And that's that. But on the flip side, Caleb, it's like, I think that greatness and insanity aren't too far from each other. Right. Like, let's talk about Kobe. Like, here's a guy who got up at 3:30, 4 in the morning to take X amount of shots, to get home, to get his kids ready, take his daughters to school, had a helicopter where he can go back to a facility. So he designed his whole life around, how can I get better and yet still be the dad and the husband that I want to be? And he managed to do that. But that for most people is insanity. Well, they're nuts, dude, or obsessed with something, right? Like,
it is obsession, but it's also strategic. So he understood the compounding interest that would have. Those workouts over time would result in championships. That was the goal, right? A lot of people see the goal and they say that, and whether you're an athlete or not, this isn't life. They see the goal and they don't know how to actually get there, right? I mean, if you talk about goals, objectives, tactics, and evaluations, that's GOAT. GOTE, that's GOAT. GOTE, goals, objectives, tactics, and evaluations. I mean, me and you were joking about noise on social media. I mean, you talk about these figureheads and these thought leaders and whatever you want to call them. They don't know the difference between a goal and an objective. They have no idea that one is a quantitative statement and one is a qualitative statement. They couldn't tell you which one is which. They don't know that a goal is a qualitative statement and an objective is a quantitative statement. They don't know the difference. But Kobe understood compounding interest, right? And something probably you can appreciate is like, these workouts will put in for a championship. I need to be a father. I need to be there. So here's my window of opportunity to increase that compounding interest and then spend time with my family. And I can get a nap in later, right? And that all this stuff will pay off in the long run, right? So he was invested in plan A, but he also had a plan B and he had other things because he knew that refined his mind. It kept him, sharp, and it kept him brilliant, and it actually challenged him. We all, in every single walk of our lives, have something that we're complacent in, right? Like, it's just normal. It is what it is.
Human behavior. It's natural.
It's human behavior.
It's why most people most people just want to hey, coast. If I got a paycheck and I got food and I can pay my bill, my rent, I'm cool. Like, that's probably 90% or more of the people.
Which goes back to the greatness and insanity thing. Because of that 90% of the people, that small window is there. of greatness and insanity? How do you get into there to see it?
Yeah. And to take it about like a step where we talk about technology and distraction, it's like, here's this bottle of water, right? What is it that Dr. Seuss says? Like, if there's a kid without an imagination is like,
it's like untapped.
Yeah, right. And if you look at technology and how us human beings, like technologies has us living in this bottle of water, and we're just thinking all day there, like algorithms just popping our thoughts, and we're not like imagining and creating. And I think guys like Kobe, guys like MJ, guys like Nick Castellanos, guys like Roy, the guys, the Jeff Bezos, they all get criticized because they actually think for themselves.
Yeah, and they think large and outside of what everybody else is.
Yeah, but that large thought starts when they have nothing. Like when it's just like a thought.
I mean, look at Cassie,
that thought into reality.
Look at Cassie, the thing with his shirt, right? His son designs this shirt and he kind of runs with it. Like this whole like Nick Castellanos, the guy you just had on, right? Yeah, like his son designs the shirt. Nobody tells him to do that. Like we live in a very copycat. I think this is what we're saying with like human behavior. It's like we see someone do it, right? So we see the bottle, we're in it, we're going to do that. They're going to run into the bottle and try to break through. Like we're going to hit this wall. We're going to try to get out the same way everybody else does. But like, why can't you just do something and be like, this is who I am. This is my organic self. Like this is me happening in real time. I mean, we're so obsessed with like authentic self. Like that's the thing. Be your authentic self, but like nobody even knows what that means anymore. Like is your authentic self going on Instagram and taking a picture next to a car, right? Or going on the beach and like turning around and like looking at your butt and taking a photo. Like that's not authentic. Nobody does that shit. But I mean, this is how we are. I mean, if we go back to like what you were talking about with like greatness and insanity and like getting there and like plan A and plan B, like a lot of this actually comes through the organization. So you mentioned something that was interesting to me, which is like, we look at this as like a risk assessment, right? Like how do we look at that? And if you think about it, there's a reason that teams draft more than 2 rounds, right? I don't know what the future of the MLB drafts are going to look like with the CBA in limbo, but like there's a reason that they draft more than one player.
It's down to like 25 rounds, right?
I think they were down to 5. It was 50, then it was 60, 50, 40, 25. Now I think
that was a 42nd round draft pick and then a 16th round draft pick.
Right. And 16
so I would have had a shot my first time.
And 16 might not even happen anymore. So like there's a reason these teams are drafting that. It's because they have to spread their investments, right? Diversify their investments. So if you think about this, what is the department, right? You get drafted, they scout you. What is the department that you then fall under? It's called player development, right? The player development oversees the affiliates, the minor leagues, all that kind of stuff. But all they're thinking about is developing the player, not the person, right? So like, why don't we change things in sports? And this is not just baseball. I'm not just taking a shot at baseball, and call it people development. Because if you change that, you're looking at the holistic viewpoint. You're looking at.
We do both people / player development.
Well, if you develop the person, if you develop the people, you're developing the player.
You're right.
Right. So it's like that's the thing I don't get is like, stop worrying about the on-field skills as much. That is a piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole thing. We hire all these people.
I actually don't think it's the most important part. I think if a dude dude can play, like it like you can teach him more of the game, but you like if it's like a hitter, like if he's a natural hitter, he's a hitter. Like what do you like? Actually, anytime that hitting coaches get involved with solid hitters, they end up messing the whole thing up because I'm like, dude, you're trying to like enhance something that's already so enhanced, and you think you can take it to another level, and you actually just take the whole puzzle and you kind of just break it apart because you're breaking this apart.
Right.
It all collaborates. It's all.
And a lot of what you're talking about is instinct. And instinct is a mental thing, right? Like it's a mental thing over years of experience and going through all that stuff and going through the repetition. I mean, the player development model is almost like it's made for the raw athlete. When they draft a guy and they go, this guy's raw, he's toolsy, like all those kind of things. Because all you're now saying is like, we can develop this guy. But what about the other ones who actually are ready, right? Like the Matt Carpenters of the world, let's just say. who was like, I think he was like a 5th-year player at TCU, right? He clearly can play baseball, right? But like, you're saying like he should just be, let's go. We don't have to develop him. He's all ready. Let's just send him away. So get him out of the player development system. We have to develop him as a person. What I'm saying is like the mental thing is there, right? But you're trying to develop a person. You have to get to know that person. Every good manager, every good coach in any sport knows how every player ticks, right? And that's up here. That's not your wrist. That's not your arm. Like, that's the thing that I don't understand that we're missing when we talk about the transition piece, because going back to your story of like, you had this exit, right? But there was no exit interview. If they knew you as a person, they would have said, all right, man, like, here are your papers. Like, we'll give you this business card, talk to this transition coach, talk to this mental health sports psychologist to help you, talk to a financial advisor. If you need one, here's our providers, like whatever it may be. But there you are. That's what happens. Like, that's what should happen if they care about you as a person. The other thing, and this is an interesting part, is
but think about it. That happens in corporate companies, right? Like, they're like,
happens in the military. And this is like
that's why you have so much crazy PTSD out there.
Yeah. But I mean, that to me is like, it's a crazy world. These people are battling. They're fighting. They're doing it for the country, right?
They're doing it so you and I can have this podcast today, dude.
Yeah.
And yet there's a dude right now underneath some rock in Afghanistan that you and I don't talk about, who's trying to keep certain things from happening here.
And we may never know the person.
And we'll never know the person. And then he'll be finished with his, career in Afghanistan, his military career. And then it's like, can I talk to somebody? Because I saw a lot of things that aren't good for me. And I thought I was strong, but what I really was doing was suppressing them. And now I'm having these crazy thoughts that, and then humanity is losing the humanistic approach, right? And really it comes down to two things. It's fear and love, right? Love is the most powerful thing that exists on the face of the earth. Like, love is just the most powerful energy that just exists. It's authentic, it's real, it's sacrificial, it's right. But we're all operating from a place of fear. I mean, look at humanity, look at wars, look at our political system, right? It's like, and they use fear to prowl on those who aren't as aware, right, or in tune with themselves, to just like manipulate the humanity. And it happens in sports, and it happens everywhere, right? And it's been happening since the beginning of time.
Yeah, it's not new. I mean,
it's not new.
There's a couple of things. One, it's funny that they're both 4-letter words, right? Just like as a joke.
I never thought about that.
They're 4-letter words, of course, right? But if you think about what fear comes from, because you are talking about like, the byproducts of each, a lot of it is insecurity, and a lot of it is vulnerability, right? So what do we fear?
But you can't just get rid of it. Like,
no, you can't. You have to work on it.
Like when people tell you, oh, we're going to get rid of fear. No, you're not. You're going to learn to have a relationship with fear.
Or the opposite. We're going to fall in love. Like, that doesn't work either. But like, it is insecurity. So like, if you fear something, a lot of times it's like, it's from your own insecurities. I've either never done that before. I've had bad experiences. I'm not strong or strengthened in that area. So you fear that, right? And that's sad. The other thing with love is people are afraid to be vulnerable, especially now. Like, everybody is going through the pandemic. Everybody is doing all these things. I said 90% of baseball players are going to go through the transition. So where is that area that we can talk about and be vulnerable and say like, man, this is what sucks, right? Like, let's not say like, don't have a plan B. Be like, if you don't make plan A, these are the things that you should have set up. Let's be vulnerable towards that. It's okay to do it. I think that's a machismo thing. Like, it's a man thing. Like, men are terrible at that. But
it's everybody funny, the toughest dudes I know are the most loving guys.
But because they're vulnerable, right? Like, you have to be vulnerable to fall in love. Otherwise, you're not really in love. In my opinion, that's just my opinion.
I agree.
And when we're talking about with like the military, that person that you just described is at its most vulnerable, and they're probably the toughest MFer in the world, right? And then they transition out, and now they're even more vulnerable without any preparation. And that's the scary part. I will say though, in my research of doing career transition research, not even baseball, right? The most areas
I lean towards baseball, Caleb, because it's natural, but this podcast has expanded.
I love baseball
to more than anything. Like we're all in transition, right? You became a dad. You're in transition.
I say that all the time.
Yeah. You're in transition.
You're going to be a boyfriend, a fiance, a husband, hopefully a father, like those are constant transitions. That's the ever evolving identity. And that's why I said that to you earlier. It's like identity is the thing that we need to talk more about. But yeah, what I was going to say with research is like the most research in career transition as it relates to anything outside of like, just not baseball is Olympics, because they're like, independent contractors virtually. They prepare for the Olympics and then it's over. College athletes, which is obvious because there's so many college athletes and not everybody goes pro. They usually work for, I think, what it was, an enterprise.
Yeah.
That's the joke. And then military. So like, those are like the biggest ones. It's like Olympics, college athletes. I mean, look at Michael Phelps. Look what Michael Phelps is doing now. Like he came out and got vulnerable where he's like, I hit rock bottom, dude. I mean, think about the hours, time, preparation, hyper-focused, execution, day in, day out. This is what I do. I'm all in. Nothing else exists. Don't distract me. And then one day it's over. He talks about his relationship with, I think, his now wife, about how much she changed him and just in terms of his perspective. And then he also talks about, his, I don't want to say reliance on marijuana, but the use of marijuana in his training and post-training and going through all that stuff. Like to be vulnerable and to be, aware and cognizant and self-assured of like, this is why I was using it. This is what I was going through. It's amazing. He didn't deny it. He didn't say this isn't who I am. He embraced it. I mean, it's a great one. And, Simone Biles, everything we saw from her was it last year or 2 years? It was last year. Just feels like a while ago. Everything. I mean, I give her an insane amount of credit, especially because the world doesn't understand what she does. And the world doesn't understand to be that elite of an athlete and to do that specific sport, right? Like what it does to your brain. It's basically giving you vertigo. She doesn't have to explain that to anybody. Who gives a shit, right? But she was able to do that. And she was able to do what she wanted to do on her own time. And then afterwards explain it. I mean, she knows herself. Like
the world has it backwards. The world looks at it like, oh, she could have, back in the day, I would have. Yeah, but you know what? She chose. And it sounds conflicting, right? Because there are times when you play the game that you're not at your best, but you still show up to the field, right? We can have that argument, right? Like there was days that Raul Ibanez just didn't have it. But he's like, I can't just like take the day off, right? I think in her situation, again, every extreme is bad. She actually had the way that sport functions is you can actually have a substitute and it doesn't,
She could have also like really badly injured herself. And I think if you go back to the Ibanez example, if he would have said, I don't have it and I'm at a risk of either injuring myself or somebody else, his decision's a little different. You know what I mean?
Correct. And that's why I say people just talk to talk and there's no substance behind what they're saying. Like
people think that everything's transactional. They think that if they pay to watch you, if they pay to do this, that you owe them some shit. It's like that. And that's the problem is nothing is transactional because we're people. And that's what I'm saying. Like you go back to the fear and love thing. It's like, we are fucking people. Like care about the person.
Fire me up, Caleb.
Yeah. I mean, like care about the person and then we can see where we can go together. But if you're just like, oh, where are we going to go? Like, what is this transaction?
I paid to watch you play, so go play.
That's how it is. I mean, that's what they
sounds like. It sounds to me like you think am I your slave?
That's exactly what it sounds like.
I mean, is that my slave? I mean, so you pay to watch me play, so I'm a slave. So then you know what, dude? Then don't come watch me play. How about that?
Right. And you know what? And if you don't come watch me play, somebody else will.
Somebody else will.
And that's what they don't understand.
Somebody more human than you will come watch me play. Right. And that's actually why I want watching me play.
Yeah. Or I'd rather have nobody. Like
I'm not playing for you. I'm playing because
I love
this game and I love this sport. Correct. And I'm glad you said that because that's where security comes in, right? It's like, it's people always also blame other people. Like I'm not where I'm at in my life because of that. Well, maybe that there's some truth in that statement, right? But now you're aware of it. Well, my environment at home sucked. Good. And it's probably why my life sucks now. Yes. Great. Now you're aware of it. Boom. We can change that now. So now you can own that. Your environment sucked, right? And now your life sucks. Great. Now what's the word that you used? You emerged. Like, I'm here. I get it. But guess what? Now I can pivot and imagine the life that I want. I can now take a different route. I can now build boundaries. I no longer have to say yes, because now I realize I have a choice. I don't have to be a part of this turmoil of this.
That's the word. Choice. Choice is the word.
I have a choice now.
Everybody has a choice when they wake up. Like, when we look at the Kobe thing with the 3:30, 4 a.m. workouts, could he have woke up on a single Friday and been like, dude, my fucking toe hurts? Or like, I really want to go crush McGriddle. Like, he could have made any choice he wanted to, right?
Yeah.
But his choice was, in the long term, I want to win a championship. To do that, I have to do these things. I have to commit to it. We don't want to commit to anything. I mean, think about it. We don't want to commit to anything because then we might lose on that transaction, right? And that's the choice that we're making. A lot of people have issues with choice, and that comes back to decision-making and all that.
People are terrified of commitment. It's like marriage. You know, my wife and I talk about this all the time. And I remember the first time I said this to her, and I can get in trouble for saying this, but I told him, babe, my commitment is greater than my feelings. What does that mean? You don't love me? I'm like, of course I love you. But like, love evolves. Like, we're not like, it's not what it was like when I first started dating you. Right?
Well, to me, that means something different.
There's different seasons of everything, right? Like,
right.
There's just different seasons and love evolves. But at the end of the day, let's say you come home and you're pissed off. Well, are you going to just pack your bags and walk away?
Right. I think that's what I was saying. So it's
because I'm committed to this relationship. And it's the same thing with whether it be your career, whether it be there's a commitment, there's a responsibility, there's a promise.
You can be very mad at your wife and still be committed and wake up the next day and be like, that happened. That was yesterday. I still love you. I'm here. Right. Like, that's the commitment over feelings thing. It's like, people don't understand that you can be mad at someone and still love them. Like that's another thing. That goes back to that fear and love thing.
I'll be honest with you. And that's very selfish, because one of the things that I learned was, like, anger is the number one emotion that we all suppress. Nobody wants to be pissed off. Right. But it's actually, if you don't show that you're angry, you're just faking the shit out of who you are, which only makes your internal self, it makes it worse. So I say that for myself, because I was a guy that never wanted to show when I'm pissed off. Now I'm like, yeah, I'm pissed. Like, I'm pissed off. Now I get pissed off for very little amounts of time, but like, I no longer say, no, I'm not mad. No, I'm fucking pissed right now. And it's okay that I'm pissed off. And if you can't handle that I'm pissed off right now, that's a you problem. Because I'm not trying to mess with you. I'm not trying to
hurt you. Yeah.
I'm just pissed off right now. The same way I can be super happy. Like, I'm super happy right now. And if you can't deal with that fact that I'm super happy, well, that's a you problem, because I can't control you or your emotions.
Think about this exact.
I think anger is an important one.
Well,
we suppress anger, man.
I don't know where I've heard it before, but anger is the first emotion that comes out because of the way we're just wired. I mean, the system of who we are, it's the first thing that comes out. So people suppress it, like you're saying, because they know it's the first reaction, right? Some people don't, and that's where their emotional intelligence is faltering. But like, what you're talking about is emotional regulation, right? I'm aware that this is happening. I know that it is. I'm going to tell you, or I'm going to feel it, and then I'm going to be able to make a decision from it. That goes back to this people development thing, right? Like, how many athletes aren't aware of what's going on, so that they're just like, oh my God, that's why I'm striking out, right? Or that's why my pitches are coming up, because I'm so tight in my back because I'm pissed off, or because I'm stressed financially that my back is hurting me. And that's like, they don't think about that stuff.
Yeah.
They don't care about the person in that regard. And I think emotional regulation is something that I think all these mental skills coaches are working on. Peak performance coaches are working on with their teams right now. But yeah, I mean, that's like a big part of it.
And it should be emotional regulation. And you should be able to tell somebody, I'm pissed. I'm pissed off. That's healthy. Oh, okay.
And see where it is.
Like, it's
see
okay.
Where it feels.
Correct. What does that feel like? Because I remember as a child, I suppressed all my emotions. I still have to, I rewire my brain every single day, Caleb. And I remember as a kid being the oldest brother, my family, but my parents were divorced. There was a lot of alcoholism in my family. There was the truth is, it wasn't a healthy environment. And I always felt like I had to take on the responsibility of acting like everything was okay. Right. I was the parent almost. And then who did that affect later on in life? You, but I was running towards a baseball field, right? What I was really doing was going to a safe place where I felt safe. I could be I could be myself. It's cool, and then go back to the same junk.
Yeah, but it also affected them too, because
back then I didn't have a choice, right? It's true that back then I really didn't have a choice.
But you probably also acted as a shield for them too.
Correct. But imagine all these athletes that are living this amazing, yes, they are a gift from God with their tools and who they are and all that, but they're still human beings. The problem is that money dictates everything nowadays. Like you say, transaction, balance sheet, profit and loss. Fine. That is important. There's no doubt about it. I'm in money to make as much money as I can. But the minute that we lose perspective on humanity, we got a problem, because you're never going to get the best out of your people, because they can't become the best version of themselves. Right. Number one. Number two, you're going to have an extremely unhealthy environment. It's going to be it's not going to be an authentic environment, because everybody just needs to walk around with a smile, when in reality, they're not happy. Now, with that said, when you do work for an organization, there are standards and there are rules and there are decisions that are made. And whether you agree with that or not, that's a whole different conversation. So if you don't like the standards of that organization and that standard pisses you off, then you probably shouldn't be in that organization, is what I'm trying to say. Right. But you have a choice. Yeah. You have a choice.
Yeah. I mean, when you're saying this stuff, what I'm thinking of is I don't want to say the Dominican players, because it's definitely more than that, but players who aren't, from the States who come to play baseball.
The truth. There's a lot of guys.
I'm even thinking of Shohei too.
Yeah.
But just any player who comes over is dealing with something that we don't understand. So baseball teams especially started to come up with cultural assimilation, English as a second language, and all that kind of stuff. But if you think about why they're doing that, it's all for them, right? We want to assimilate you to this culture so that you perform better, so that we can market you, sell tickets, you're the best who you are, and all that kind of stuff. We want you to learn English so that you are now marketed better, so that you can make more money, so that you speak to the reporters, you speak to the media. I love what Acuna is doing, right? In terms of, this is who I am. I'm going to speak English to the best of my ability, but I'm also going to speak my native language, because that's who I am. I love what Shohei is doing. That kind of human piece is what we need. Let these people be who they are and stop saying you have to speak our language because we're here. And listen, I'm from Philly, where a cheesesteak place years ago told people that they won't serve you unless you speak Philadelphia. It's not even English, Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah. Shit. My American Cuban accent would have been thrown my ass out of there.
I mean, look, that stuff got buried under some kind of internet rug. But these baseball players, they need to be able to thrive in their own systems. And then when you surround them with people, not only like themselves, but who are, this is our new culture, it changes the game. A lot of people say, baseball is not fun. And then they always go, well, it was fun when they did the World Baseball Classic, right? That was fun. And why is that? Think about it. It's because they're with their people, right? They're with their culture. So when you talk about culture and belonging, yeah.
And culture is everything, right? I mean, what a boring place the world would be if we were just all the same. As simple as dude, imagine going to the Bahamas and having, you don't have Bahamians. I'm well, this sucks. We're just all I go to the Bahamas and I want to have a clique at the bar and I want to talk to the town guy, serving Goombay Smash or whatever. And you want to enjoy the culture. When I go to Philly, I want to have a true Philadelphia cheesecake and I want to hang out with Caleb and when you come to Miami, you want to come into a diverse town and that's the beautiful thing about life. It's, that we're all different. But we're all the same.
That goes back to the fear and love. That goes back to fear and love.
At the core, we're all made in God's image. We're a soul, dude. We're a spirit. We all have love. We all have fear, and we all bleed red. That's not by coincidence.
Yeah. I mean, let's open up a new word. One of my favorites, right? Curiosity. If you have a curiosity to go learn a culture, embrace a culture, to go there and just say like, I don't know what they'll talk like. I don't know what beer they prefer. I don't know what delicacy they love here. Like, I don't know that stuff, but I'm willing to learn. Your whole perspective changes. And it's the same thing when we talk about developing people. And it doesn't have to be an athlete at all. If you go in with like, hey, this experience that I'm about to encounter is going to change my life, whether it's good, bad, I'm going to learn from it. That curiosity just changes everything. I mean, again, I'm going to bring up Kobe, but like, I don't think there's ever been an athlete as curious as Kobe Bryant. I really just don't. I really just like firmly believe that he was at its peak when it talks about curiosity. I want to learn everything about the game. I want to look at posters. I want to look at cards. I want to look at photos of how this guy positioned, how his muscle was tweaked and why, and like just learning all that kind of stuff. And I think teams need to do a better job of educating players and knowing how they think. And how can you get the best out of your players?
You know what gave Kobe the ability to be curious? His imagination. The fact that his mind was in a healthy place. Like you can't think about being curious. Like think about when you're at your happiest moment. Have you ever sat down? This sound really weird. Have you ever sat down on a Saturday evening and you're just watching TV, or you're just like and you're out in your porch, wherever, right? And all of a sudden, for like 10 seconds, you get this unbelievable sense of happiness. It lasts 10 seconds. Sorry about that, right? I think it's because you were actually in the present moment. You were actually there. Like for 10 seconds, your mind was exactly there. It wasn't thinking about some futuristic task, worry. It was just, I'm here. And when you are in the present, it's a present. It's like you're at peace with what is. And it's happened. I mean, you get this, and then you crave it again because all of a sudden your mind shifts and then starts thinking about other things again. And we get an average of like 80,000. I think I read, I may have Googled this. Okay. And I don't know if it's accurate.
Like how many thoughts go across?
I think it's like 70,000 thoughts a day. I mean, think about that. You're not even aware of that. You know, it's funny. It's like the whole step thing on your watch. You're like, I took 20,000 steps today. I'm like, dude, you take 20,000. Yeah. You actually took like numbers that like, you don't even like think about. Well, imagine if you can bring that thought process down to like just being still. And I think in the world that we live in, with all the noise that is out there, that causes then this crazy resistance within yourself, right? I think, and Nick Cassiano said it best on the podcast on Wednesday, simplicity is everything, because it's life's not that complicated, Caleb. I mean, we've got everything. Like, let's say that the world stopped printing money tomorrow. There's right. Like the currency never existed, right? Trade never existed, but we were just all humans on earth. There's cows, there's food, there's vegetables, there's water, there's rain, there's sun, there's daytime, there's nighttime, there's spring, there's fall. Like everything already exists. Power, fear, and ego and currency change how we think, because nothing really matters. Like we have everything that we need. We have everything we need. Like we don't need, like I can live under a tree and give it a shelter, like, and be fine. I don't need a house. I have a house because I was born into this decade of life or this century.
Well, you have a house.
I may be going off topic or like way out there, but like, think about it. Like,
no, you have a house because you're able to provide. So like the ability, right? It's to do that. It doesn't mean that you need it. Like that. I think what you're saying is difference you need and want. And that's definitely a thing. I mean, the thing that keeps coming back to my head, and especially when you talk about simplicity, is space, right? Like you talk about the evening and like having that moment to yourself to be able to think about that. And what you're really talking about is mindfulness, right? Like I get that for myself. I try to wake up at 6 or before 6. Sometimes I have this internal alarm clock that wakes me up before 6. And to go downstairs, let the coffee go, right? Sit there, whether I'm reading a book or I'm just with my dog, and have that moment to collect myself before I go, this is the shit I have to conquer today, right? Like, but mindfulness and meditation are always like lumped in together, like they're one and the same. And I think that what people lose track of is really what you're saying is pay attention to where your attention is. Like pay attention to what it is. I mean, we see people do different things, whether they're closing their eyes and they're coming to of like, this is how I'm going to, I mean, we see baseball players do it all the time. They're on the sidelines during the national anthem and they're just going like this to kind of collect themselves. But it's really just paying attention to where your attention is. And I think that's very similar to what you were talking about with emotional regulation. If you're angry, where do you feel that? Is it in your shoulders? Is it in your lower back? Like, is your heart like pounding? Like, what is it? But if you're paying attention to where that is, that's what mindfulness is. Like, I mean, I can tell you from personal experience, I went through therapy since I was little. Similar to you, my parents were divorced when I was super little, and they put you in therapy just because your parents are divorced. And I ended up going, I mean, it is and it isn't, because you go to therapy and I think they're like, hey, you're here. And that's like, what do we do here? But it's just like, welcome to the club. Here's some M&Ms. But like, I went to therapy later, and I think
that's funny.
And I say this all the time, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, are things that people need to talk more about. Because those two therapies, what they help you to do is they educate and empower you to be your own therapist, right? Like you have to be your own therapist. You can't just rely on having someone that's going to go there, that you're going to go there in your physical space and you need all that stuff. You need to create that space for yourself. The funny thing about what you're saying is we get wrapped up in the busy life, right? And I totally agree that this happens. It's like, we have kids running around, we have our job, we have our family, we have our friends. They're telling us all this stuff, and it's like noise. So it's like not just on Instagram, it's noise in real life. How do you carve out that space for yourself? And things like what you're talking about with that thought might happen to people while they're driving, might happen when they're taking a shower, might happen when they're working out. And that's okay if you can get to that space. Not every time, but sometimes.
I think the only way to create, I think you have to create the space, right? Like
you have to.
It's like it has to be intentional. And it's like, again, I talk about environment a lot because I think environment's crucial, right? Like it's okay if you grew up in an environment that wasn't healthy, and now you realize, okay, now I have a choice. I'm an adult, I'm 18, or whenever you feel like I can go speak to somebody, you can now start to imagine and to create the environment that you want, which is healthy. It's loving, it's joyful, there's peace there. It's not perfect. Life will always throw stuff at us, right? It's part of being a human being. I think it's a part of the process. Like it sucks. Nobody wants to go through it, but it's the evolution of us, and there's a reason it's happening. That's a whole different conversation. But
I'll tell you these two things. These are things that I just love in life. I'm an educator, number one. Like you have to understand that my perspective here is not something from like a mental health or sports psychologist. It's an educator. And I think the two most powerful things that you can have in life is to know how you think, right? And how you learn. If you know those two, and they're not the same thing. They are not the same thing. If you know those things, you can conquer anything. If you know how you learn, all I have to do is put the content and material in front of you and you can do it. If you know how you think, you can start that process in terms of whether it's getting yourself in emotional regulation, you can think about creating your own space and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people, when you ask them that question, have no answer. Like my famous thing that I've done with baseball players is, why do you like baseball? And if I ask 10 baseball players why they like baseball, I'm going to likely get 9 different answers, right? What's the number one answer you think that I get when I usually do that? Because I'm good at it.
I'm good at it. It makes me, yeah.
Like that is the most egotistical, self-serving thing. I get it. I understand where it's coming from, but that's not why they like it, right? Why do you like it? And I always ask, like, tell me what you like about the sport, and changes it. Because if you just like it, right, because you're good at it, eventually you won't be good at it. And then what happens? And this is what you're talking about, the love thing. Like when you were talking about the love thing and your commitment over feelings, eventually you won't be good at it. I mean, besides Julio Franco, who played baseball when they were 70 years old, right? But
I heard Manny Ramirez hanging out in Australia playing, not for like last year. It's crazy.
He might be the one, right? I mean, there's probably other guys who will play until they're 70. If we see Brady doing it, it'll eventually happen. But my joke was, eventually you're not going to be good at it. So like, what is it? Do you like the failure of the game? And when I say like that kind of stuff, like, oh yeah, I do. I like failing at it. Like, it's the joy of like succeeding 3 times and being a Hall of Famer kind of thing. Like, what do you like about the game? Do you like being with a team? Once we start to get those questions, it actually helps to transfer those skills, to transfer those interests, those likes that you have, and transfer that into like another career, whether it's insurance or something else. Like, that's the thing that like we have to start those conversations. And it really comes down to like how you think and how you learn. Because I think those are so powerful. And I'll be honest, when you're talking about like, the atmosphere, the environment, the surroundings, all that kind of stuff. I grew up in a household that was kind of loud, right? So like, I didn't realize that like when I was older that I didn't need quiet to study. Like people are always like, turn your phone off, turn the lights down low, like
leave me alone.
No distractions. I'm like, you know what I need? To blast music. Because if I blast music and I study, I'm going to recall when I'm doing my test or paper or anything, what song was playing while that thing I studied was up there. And it's ridiculous. Like, it's ridiculous for someone to hear that and be like, that's fake. Like, you're not really saying that. I'm like, that's how I would remember things. I could tell you what song was playing while I studied that because I needed the chaos, right? I thrived in chaos. Once I learned how I learned, it was a game changer in my life.
I believe that. All right, man, we're gonna have to start wrapping this up, Caleb. So where can like our viewers and listeners, like where can they find you? I mean, I definitely want to start promoting yourself as much as I can in our team. I actually want to regroup with you again before the end of the year.
Yeah, let's definitely do that.
I think there's a lot that's left untapped here. But where can people find out more about you, players? I would love to share some information with my contacts about you. So where can they get that information?
Yeah, number one, thank you for that. Number two, I would say I'm still launching. Like, I'm still trying to get into this bigger launch of my company, which is called Grit and Glue. I'll just give like a little promo there. Grit to me is the hard work, but glue is the cohesiveness that keeps it together. A lot of us do hard work. We put our head down, we grind, but there's really no strategy involved. And I'm here to kind of guide that strategy. While baseball players, we know that they work hard. I mean, you're not an athlete if you don't. So that's what Grit and Glow is. I'm going to revamp my website in the upcoming months, but I'm on social for Grit and Glow. And then my personal stuff is Caleb Mezzy. So I'm pretty sure it's Caleb_Mezzy, CALEB_MEZZY. You could see stuff from, brain things that I talk about, books I read, family stuff, things I'm teaching in the classroom. But really, like, you get to know me as a human, and that was kind of the theme that we talked about. So Caleb Mezzy on social, and then Grit and Glow.
Awesome, Caleb. Well, it was a pleasure to have you on, dude. Thank you
very
so much.
It's a great conversation.
It was a blast. I learned a lot. I mean, that's the one thing I get out of this is just I get to meet people like yourself and build relationships. And if I'm ever in Philadelphia, I'm going to hit you up and we're going to catch a Phillies game together.
Yes,
cool with you.
Yeah, of course.
And thank you. So I definitely want to catch up, and I want to regroup again with Caleb. He's special, and he's definitely got something going on here. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was nice getting to know you. And then we talk about the things that I love, which is, the brain, the education, and of course, baseball.
Thank you, Caleb.